What up, books? I told you I was going to do that, Chris. Welcome to the show, brother. Are you freaking excited? As pumped as I am, because I'm pumped.
I'm always pumped, dude. I love it. I'm excited.
I'm so excited that you're pumped too. So sorry we're a little bit late. As some people know, I balance 14-month-old, a full-time job, life in general, and trying to build multiple companies. So that's why sometimes I'm late. I'm sorry. I apologize about this. But Chris and I were talking, a lot of good conversation before we started. I know this is going to be a banger of a podcast. But before I introduce him and we get into the world famous midlife crisis question, a couple of updates. Been working with Bubble. Love this guy to death. He's got an incredible strategic mind. And we've actually been doing some pitch shops is what we're calling them. And you can come talk about your personal brand. We'll use our years of experience to help you out, kind of hone your pitch as a creative person, or it could just be in a regular business. So we've been doing those spaces, having a lot of fun, getting a lot of good feedback. We actually had somebody that started off with one idea and has evolved it into a music festival, all based off our conversations. So lots of fun. I am talking to many big projects, many big people like Chris himself, and we're going to keep the podcast. The goal is once a week to get a live one. In addition, I finally got on a traditional podcast platform because crypto Twitter, not as podcast friendly as Spaces. So I am on Spotify, working on Apple Music, Amazon, all of the things. I already have some followers. Would love anybody out in the audience to go check my profile out. Hit me up on Spotify. So that's Mikey G in a nutshell. What I really want to get to, though, is Chris. This is his safe space. And me and Chris are going to become best friends in the next hour and change. I would love to have 2 hours, but we're going to have a freaking blast. But before we get to the actual conversation, I'm going to do a little soft intro. Always love the intro. So Chris, the man, the myth, the legend, he's been on the video train for 20 plus years. And I'll tell you this, doing something for 10 years is phenomenal. Doing something for 20 plus years, you know a thing or two about what you're doing. So when it comes to video, which is by far the future of all content creation, yes, I know AI is a thing, but to truly understand how to make video, Chris is one of the people in the space doing it right. So you're going to want to hang on every word that this man says as we have the conversation. In addition, it's not just crypto Twitter he's trying to do this. He does it for TikTok, YouTube, multiple platforms, very tenured. And then the other thing that I really like about this is he had a brick and mortar business in the automotive industry, has since turned that to a digital business and figured out a way to produce residual income. And that's really, really important for people to understand that I actually think that's the future too. There are a lot of people that are still stuck in that mindset of I need a corporate job, work up the ladder, and that's how I'm going to get paid. Multiple forms of income is the future. And if you're not thinking that way, you're in trouble. Chris, how did I do as the intro? Did I do you justice, my man?
Nailed it. Yeah, you did good, man.
Fantastic. And dude, you sound beautiful. It's very rare. You know, I'm usually getting iPhone mics and stuff, but damn, you sound real good, brother. So I appreciate the audio video setup as well. And your background looks beautiful. The lighting, everything's going on. I mean, that's a product of understanding know-how of film and audio. This is huge. This is huge in this space. So with all that being said, man, we're here. We're here already. And it is the world famous midlife crisis question. Chris, how did you get to the seat you're sitting in today? Please give me episode 1, 2, and 3. To reiterate for the audience, episode 1, childhood influences, whether it be your parents' memories, were you a tinkerer, what really helped start molding that mindset of this beautiful human that's across the screen from me? Episode 2, the automotive stuff that we talked about, or your professional career. How did you hone those skill sets to prep you for what you're doing in Web3? And then what does the future look like? So I cannot wait to hear it, man. Let's get it.
Let's go. Yeah. Well, I mean, first off, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Second off, I literally still have a silly little cup of whiskey that I've not opened up yet, and I may have to just tap into that.
Do you want to tell people about that real quick?
I mean, it goes like this. The way I feel about a lot of this stuff. People overly worry and they undership. You know, they don't put things out nearly enough, and they sit and they plan and they have meetings and they
Mhm.
prep, but they don't just do. And all I want people to do is just make stuff. Just do it, ship it, send it out there, learn. Doesn't have to be 100%. And what happened in this was we were 80% of the way to shipping, then it just didn't happen.
Yeah.
It just died.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just,
It
it
was
just didn't, nothing came of it. And your boy didn't get to drink the whiskey that he was excited to drink, even if it was only 80% dialed in. That's okay.
Dude, I drank that already. You're out of your mind if you haven't drank that yet. So, and what we're talking about is we got hit up by a project whiskey guy. Listen, I had Grant on, amazing podcast, really good dude, but a product of, again, what people need to hear, man, you have these amazing ideas, but if you cannot bring them to fruition, and this guy was like 80% there. We had whiskey. We were going to do a podcast. We're going to do a live podcast tasting. But when it came to the actual day and getting the people together, just that little nuance, right? Like seems like so simple. The logistics of getting the KOLs and the influencers to produce a show, we couldn't get that off the ground. And now crickets since what, 6 months ago, you know?
Yeah,
Such a
it
cool
happens.
thing in the space. And I already wrote it down, bro. We already have a short. Just do shit. It's such a simple message. People, it is not that difficult to just, you got AI. You have every tool known to me. You don't even know how to use it. You don't really have to know how to use a video camera. You can press a button that says auto and it will do it basically for you. So just do shit, people. It's not that hard. So I love that. We're already not into episode 1 and you're giving alpha. So thank you. So go ahead. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that being said, it comes from episode 1. It comes from my childhood of like when I got into video and all this stuff. You know, I was a kid. I was just a little dude that was going out skateboarding with his homies, and like we just filmed it because we wanted to go back. We sat and we'd watch skate videos all the time, and we would want to go out and learn how to do tricks and document, film it, and then watch the tapes back later at night to see how cool we looked. And we looked stupid, you know, we were little kids doing little tricks. It's like, it wasn't like the videos that we were watching, but we were so inspired by somebody who was just going out there, doing it, just doing cool shit, filming it, and then getting it in front of other people. We were those other people, you know, 11, 12-year-olds out there in the, you know, mid 90s, like just wanting to be like these guys doing these crazy stunts. And so, I mean, a big part for me that I learned very early on was that I wanted to film my buddies like the guys were filming the ones doing the big tricks on the cool videos that we watched.
Right.
But when I watched my section that my buddies filmed, they sucked at filming. They didn't even try. They didn't want it to look good like those things. They just sat there and held the camera, and it was all shaky and it was all shitty. And for me, I was like, dude, I want my section to look cool too. And so every time I would film my buddies, I tried to make their section look really cool. And so, you know, long story short, I didn't understand that there was a separation between creators and consumers all the way back when, you know, I was a little kid before I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And so, and that's been a really big theme for me, kind of like going through all this stuff, is that like, I'm just happiest as a creator that makes the stuff and puts it out there. And that's why social media has been like this very mentally healthy thing for me, because I'm on the different end of it than most people.
Yeah. I mean, believe it or not, you just gave me enough information to talk for at least an hour. This is the skill set that I've gained. So there's a couple things here. One thing's really interesting to me, and I'd love your take on this. It's amazing to me the amount of people that have come to this show that use skateboarding as a reference on how they got into creative and videography. What are your thoughts there? And like, not only thoughts, but like, why do you think that happens? I mean, that's always fascinating to me.
I mean, I use skateboarding to get girls. I use skateboarding to get free product. I use skateboarding as a creative outlet and as like a kind of rebellious. I don't need anybody. I'm me versus me. Because it
Right.
doesn't matter who you skate. Like, doesn't matter if your friends are really good at skateboarding or not. Sure, it's nice to be, in an environment where you can watch other people and you can learn from them.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know if you're out there on a football team, you're relying on all these other people. If
Right.
you're out there and it's you and the handrail and your skateboard, the
Mhm.
only thing protecting you from not casing that thing and racking your nuts on that rail is how committed are you to doing that trick. You don't get a coach or a team or anybody else to point the finger at. Bro, you bail halfway down that trick, you're going to catch that rail to the nuts. And like, that's your fault.
Right.
There's no one else to blame. And so
Right.
that you versus you is such a creator centric theme that really, like, you can't compare yourself to the guy on the video or your buddy who's too afraid to try, because that has nothing to do with, are you going to squash your nuts on that rail?
Ugh.
It's just you. So
No,
I just
I like
embrace the hell out of that.
Yeah, I like the insight, and I love how I think it's the first time in my life we had link creators to crushing nuts. I
Yeah,
mean, it
dude.
worked out. So, question to follow up this with it, and you said something really interesting to me, which was you're getting fed up because of your buddy's skill sets when it came to filming you. So
Mhm.
at a really, really early age, like I'm interested in the things that you wanted to pay attention to. You mentioned camera shake, but like what are the things that you started diving into? Because the reason I bring this up, I think it's critically important for creatives to be curious. And so when you're curious, it leads to new revelations and aha moments that help hone your skill, right? But what I'm fascinated by is you had this at a very, very early age, which most people don't. So what were you like frustrated about? What rabbit holes did that send you down?
Well, I mean, I think the frustration is mainly, it's so superficial. It's just kind of like, I want to look as cool on video
Mhm.
as
Mhm.
my friends who I'm making look cool on video. Like, I don't know. I wanted it to be the golden rule, right? Like, you do for others that, like, how you would want them to do it for you.
Right.
And so yeah, I mean, there was that. And then there was just like the local skate shop that I went to. One of the main guys, the manager of that shop, he was the guy that was excited to show his new lens that he got on a camera. Now, keep in mind, this is 10 years before YouTube,
Right.
right?
Right.
And my
Right.
guy's excited because he just spent a ton of his money. The guy doesn't make a lot of money. He's a manager at a skate shop in the 90s, right?
Mhm.
Now, granted, some of those owners made millions of dollars because those were amazing days for that industry. But at that time, you worked at the shop. That doesn't mean that, like, you're living your best life. It just
Right.
means you live, breathe, you eat, sleep skateboarding. That is your whole thing. And
Right.
so this dude would go out there and he'd film, and then he'd bring that footage back and then chop it up, and it'd be like like the new team for the skate shop would
Right.
have their sections and all that. And in those days, like, just on the hierarchy of coolness, like, if you were sponsored and you skated for a shop or a brand, dude,
Yes.
you were just elevated.
Right.
That was before there were influencers. There were sponsored skateboarders, and they
Mhm.
were way the hell cooler than influencers are now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think there was just this pull that I wanted to attain this level of, I'm recognized by my peers. I have evidence of it,
Yep.
and then I'm rewarded for that publicly. And what that usually looked like is, you walk into the skate shop, they'd be like, "What up?" They know you by name. They'd be like, "Hey, we just got some new shirts. Go grab one off the rack." And like, "Did you see the new decks, dude?" Honestly, like, what do you need a new setup? Like, if you got to walk in and just hook yourself up, walk behind that counter where no one else was allowed, grab some bearings, grab some wheels, throw them on your setup, and like swap to the new deck with the new graphic from that company, like,
Yeah.
that just felt amazing. So that was kind of like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and the content was the way to get there.
Dude, I love it. And here's some couple of things of follow-up thoughts here, which is I think it's also, social media gets a really bad rap, obviously, because it is super toxic. Like I have a young son, and I am not letting him get social media apps for a long, long time because there's a lot of hurt there.
Yep.
But what you said, I think, is important, which it's okay to be happy about getting notoriety, being liked, being part of a crew. Like that is obviously one of the main reasons a lot of people do this. But what I also heard, which read between the lines, and I think this is a fascinating conversation. I'd love to hear your take. Ego, right?
Mhm.
Now, not ego in a bad way, but there was a little ego at play there saying that, hey, I wanted to be the best. I wanted my content to be better. And that drove you. How important do you think ego is and how to balance it as a creator? Because I think that's a really fascinating conversation.
Yeah, dude, it is. And honestly, that's a long conversation, but I'll just say in a nutshell, ego is a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
So on one hand, you've got this evidence, you've got this proof, you've got your receipts, you did all this stuff. On the other edge of that sword is perfectionism, and that is your enemy. And when just like our friends that probably had a really cool idea and it could have been a big deal and it could have been activated sooner, the perfectionism stopped them
Mhm.
from getting it out there. And so ego is one of those things. You used a word that's best. I'm kind of somebody who's like, I'm not super competitive where I'm better than somebody else. I just care that I'm better than I was. And like, I'm a big fan of being happy with what you're doing and like being happy on the journey. I'm less of a guy who's like, I got the thing as the reward. Like I have the Lambo because I worked really hard. Right.
Yeah.
I'm more like, do you still have your first wife and the Lambo? Do
Yeah.
you have a relationship with your kids and the Lambo? Like, do you value the Lambo less than the relationships in your life? So, there's a lot at stake here. But on the ego side, where it's like, did your belief in yourself, your confidence, did it lead you to put the thing out there?
Yes.
Or did it make you so afraid, like the very fit, attractive people that are the most self-conscious people on the planet that are just like
Mhm.
just riddled with insecurity, even though they've got the six pack and everything else, they're miserable because they've chosen this like perfectionist mindset. And so they look in the mirror and they don't see 80% amazing or 98% amazing. They just see the things that they're lacking. They just see that 20% that's not done. And that to me, I'm just not interested in.
Yeah.
So like ego drives me, but at the same token, I kind of really don't give a shit what people think. So it allows me to just ship. I just get it
Yeah.
done.
And so you actually answered my follow-up question with your comments, which was how do you balance it? And I think you said it beautifully in the way that you need enough ego to drive yourself to make high quality content. But the instant your ego turns into, I need to be the best in the world, that becomes super dangerous in the sense. And I've had many people on this podcast that attribute the number one cause to their failure was ego.
Mm,
And it manifested exactly in that, which is you try to become this perfectionist and then you chase being the best. And then you get there and you're like, oh, what the fuck? No, like this, I've been chasing the wrong thing my whole life. And I think you perfectly said it is how do you get the Lambo and keep your wife? And
mhm.
that's like a very practical way of saying it. So I appreciate the insight, man. Already a fantastic conversation. You've said so many cool things. What I'm interested now is are there any family influences? Are there mantras other than I know skating was a big part of the creative world, but how about you as kind of a human, right? Like what molded that mindset there?
Yeah, so I came from a business family,
Mhm.
immigrants from the old country, from Russia that didn't speak English, and
Wow.
started a business here and all that, and in the 50s, and so when I was coming up, it was like my dad, my uncle, my grandparents, all the cousins, like everything was attached to this family business,
Wow.
and they all hated each other. And so I come from a pretty savage group
Right.
of people that would get together at Christmas, then get together at holidays and all that stuff, and they all worked together. But nobody was encouraged to actually go chase the things that they were passionate about.
Mhm.
because dad, the guy that started the company, dad passed away in 72 when my dad was 18 years old. So his dad started this thing, didn't speak a lick of English, you know, came up, started from working for one company, did their own thing, ends up getting a big mansion in Pasadena. And when my dad would walk out the front door and he was a kid, as a teenager, and he could hear the local garage band playing down the street. And it was Van Halen.
Wow.
They're in Pasadena. Like this is
Wow.
this is good. All of a sudden, dude, 45 years old, finds out he's got stomach cancer. It just takes him like that. And
Wow.
so family goes into this full on like recover mode. Like, the kids have to take on the responsibility, and like everybody's life decisions were just made for them. So imagine that you've got that, and then 15 years later or whatever, I come along, or just like my dad is in this situation where he has to do it and all that, right? I grew up as like, bro, I just wanted to rebel. I didn't want to do anything that I had to do, because I watched how that was like this shackle around my dad's ankle, my uncle's ankle. Everybody was just tied to this business. It was
Mhm.
great. And I'm grateful for all the business lessons and all that. But the same token, their business owned them. And I never wanted that to be my story, right? We're like,
Yeah.
oh, I would have moved to this place and had this life I wanted, but I couldn't, because I couldn't leave the company. And so, as you can imagine, being, the son of a business guy who his whole life is dedicated to that, I just had business pounded in my head my whole life.
Mhm.
And the very kind of like ironic part about it is that it was like, if you don't work for yourself, then you're not good enough, and you're not, you don't matter. You're just an employee. Employees are bad. Employees, like, and nothing in any of that had anything to do with you following your passion or loving what you do, or really caring about like why you do it. It was just, you do it because you have to. Oh, and by the way, don't go do your own thing. Work for the family company. so
Right. So
so
you're
ironic,
basically
bro.
an
It's the
employee.
opposite.
You're an employee of the
Yeah.
family, which is
Right.
really interesting. And dude,
Right.
this is I people get my avid followers have to get so annoyed because I say this all the time. Passion is such a critical part to growth of anything in life, and especially entrepreneurship in my mind. And the more I hear people like you, it's such a critical part. And what I love about what I do here is we cover the same. Like, listen, there's no shock as to some of the success principles it takes to be good, which is discipline over a long period of time, passion, taking risk, all of these things, right? But how you put it was in a really interesting way, because I've never heard somebody everything you described. There's a lot of people that wish they could be more entrepreneurial, and that sounds like a great setup. But there's drawbacks, there's consequences to everything you do. And I think it's beautiful that you came out of that with the critical understanding that passion is so key to success. So that's one big learning. I'm actually interested in the opposite, which was, okay, this is something that you were missing and you were going to go chase. What did that scenario actually help out with? Like, what were some benefit, even though they were fighting and all of these different things? There had to be some silver linings there, or maybe there's not. Maybe I'm wrong.
Oh no, so here's the beautiful thing is, I had the best dad. He sounded like he's this like business guy. He was two people. He was the guy that existed at the family business, and then at home, he was the guy that was always letting us know the love, the support, all of this stuff. And so these lessons kind of came in, super Christian dude. He's teaching me about the Bible. He's teaching me about business. Very like he would tie everything together as best as he could, and he's just a human. What I
Yeah.
didn't know until I was older was like, guess what? Your parents are just people, you know.
Right.
Oh, and by the way, you're just like them, and
Yeah.
that's kind of it's a crazy thing. Some people spend a lot of time fighting against. Sucks if you had terrible parents. You
Yeah.
probably have things that you've taken from a lot of people in your life, mentors, teachers, different people. In my case, I did have a great dad, a good, mom who they both had their strengths, and I took a lot of their strengths and a lot of their weaknesses that I was at least aware of. And I used their weaknesses to try to avoid the pitfalls that I saw them go through. And so that was, I mean, above and beyond a silver lining. But I'll say in just the business sense of it, I got to learn how to just look at things business minded from the time I was young. And beautiful thing, I found out I was a salesman through and through, and I enjoyed it. I didn't feel bad about it because like I was exposed to these things. It was like, hey, we're gonna be at this event, and we're, like, hey, Chris, you should get up there and like, like take the money from the people and give them the product and all that. From the time I was a little guy.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people never get that interaction until they're damn near grown and they've got a boss that's kind of cracking the whip behind them, like, get in there and do the work or else. And for me, it was much more of this like exciting, fun thing that I didn't even understand at the time because I was just exposed to it so young. So I don't know, man, it's in my blood. Like I've just got this entrepreneurial streak that goes back as far as the generations in Russia go before they were orphaned and Cossacks and crazy, like tales of the motherland kind of stuff goes on. But it's who I am to do business. And so like getting to tie that in with something so creative and so independent, that's a huge part of it too. That's kind of taking from the strengths and the weaknesses and combining the best of both of them, at least for me and what I want out of life. So yeah, man, grateful for that.
Great insight. And the other thing that I pull out that I've heard, I really do think special things come from, and people go through their whole life and never find this, right? But if you can find your passion, your superpower, like you said in sales, like it's very rare to have a really cool, good, creative guy like yourself that can make high-end quality stuff that is also good at sales, right? I'm an example of that. I think I have one of the best podcasts in the space, if not the world. I'm going to have my ego and I'm going to put that at the top tier. I'm really good at podcasting. I suck at selling myself. I get imposter syndrome. I do all of these things, even though I've had massive guests come to my show. And I just want to give everything away for free, right?
Right.
And you have like molded and understood the implications of, because if you have that mindset when running a family business, now you're not putting food on the table. Like I've never had that consequence. And so I suck at that business mentality. And it's really cool that you brought both. One thing I want to touch on before we get into kind of the middle, because I do have a hard stop at 1:40 and we started a little late. I can go to 1:45. Do you have a hard stop at 1 or 2:30 or?
I got meetings nonstop, but it's all good, bro. We're going to take as long as we take and then I'll show up for those meetings.
Okay. So, I had it. I drank a lot of alcohol in my life, so sometimes I forget it. What was it? Oh, yes, this. I think one of the things, the most important thing you said actually was the weakness part.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what people don't hear enough is you recognize weakness, but how did you do it? Like and if you're open, to talk about a version of the weakness, because I think people talk about these high level concepts, but I think it's also good to get tangible, actionable things, right? So how do you take one of those weaknesses and act upon it, and what was it?
So 2 examples. One of them I already touched on, the being afraid to like go do things because you're chained to something else. So that unwillingness to kind of like break free and go do things, I just see as a weakness. It's an excuse. A lot of people have it. Most people dress it up as this like martyrdom or this like noble cause where they're like, I'm suffering so that you can have that. It's like, no, you're clinging to what you think is safe and you're doing that. And then you're making somebody else pay for that. And then you're telling them that you're doing it for them. Don't do that. Own your shit. If you're afraid to go do something, just say, I'm afraid to leave this because if I fail, I'm so afraid of failure and it impacting me and it impacting the people that I love. I'm so afraid of it that I'm not willing to risk it. I think that's being self-aware about why you're not chasing your dreams. But me, I say, fuck that. I'm going to chase my dreams. And if I fail, I'm going to learn from it. And I want my kids to know that if dad failed chasing his dreams, he was chasing his dreams. Right? He wasn't just blaming them for why he can't go do the things that he wants to do in life, because I want them to chase their dreams. Yep. So why would I not be the example for them to follow in? Because if I'm too afraid to do it, I'm guessing they're going to have that impact them in their life. So that's one side of the weakness. And then, there's lots of weaknesses that I could kind of pick up on, but I'd say the other one is the failure to ship. That's kind of the like being so in your world and so in your thing that like you're always talking and you're just not doing. Too many meetings about things that you're not actually gonna do. I got to witness that a lot in my family, in the family business. It was a mess. Like, you don't want to be, family businesses are not for the faint of heart. Not for people with thin
You're laying
skin.
all these personal emotions on
Oh,
top.
it's and you don't get to check out. Like, you take it home, you take it to Easter, you take it to Christmas and all of that. And so I would just say that I learned that done is not subjective. The quality of how good it was and all of those things, that's all subjective. Those are all things that you can address after. But if something's late, it's late. If it's not done, that if it's not shipped, there's nowhere to go from there, right? That's the kind of stuff that leads to these heated discussions at these holiday groups and all that stuff. So I'm a big fan of like, get shit done, finish it, and learn from maybe your failure to like have it done as high a quality as you want, but then iterate and build on that stuff. Cause that's not subjective. The you getting things done and learning from reps is not subjective, but like was it good? I don't know. Depends who you ask.
Absolutely. No, awesome insight, incredible conversation. I actually think this is a good segue into kind of episode 2 here, which is really starting to talk about strategy. Like I said, we could already talk for 3 hours just on episode 1 and what we talked about. But here's my question for you, because I want to see if you can yes and this, or you have any other thoughts. I went through a major depressive order, and it was wild and shifted my life, right, of my perspective. And one thing I got really good at is just doing shit, right? I've done this podcast I've been streaming podcasting for almost 5 years now, right? And no one, for the first year and a half, I think I had 30 followers. No one knew who the hell I was, but I just didn't stop. One thing I was horrible at, then again, Bubble, gonna give this dude another shout out, is learning from failures, but even before that, before you do it, strategically thinking. What is your thought on that? So I'll give you an example, right? I loved Web3. I still love Web3. And so I lucked out being an original Hate Beast mod. And I had to recognize that my superpower was talking to people and creating a podcast. But simple things like, crypto Twitter is not the greatest place to be streaming, the only place to be streaming. Like, you have to be on Spotify. You have to be on Apple Podcasts. Like, these are traditional podcast platforms. That's where people expect podcasts to be. And I kept on running my head up against the wall. I was like, no, I'm going to change the meta of podcasting and crypto Twitter. But at the end of the day, no one gives a shit, right? Like, it's very, very difficult to change that. So what is your thought on strategy layered on to getting things done, and how important is that?
So I think that knowing where you're going is very important. I think there's a lot of sayings about this where you're not really measuring where you're going to land the plane. So it's like, well, are we on course or whatever? It's like, we don't know, but we know we're going fast and we're making good time and all that. But it's like, at what point are you flying a plane and then you just realize, like, we haven't spotted where we're supposed to land this thing,
Right.
And we're going to run out of gas and then we're going to die. Like that's actually a thing. Like, imagine if they just didn't know where they were going to touch down. They're like, so good news, we're going really fast. Bad news, we're about to run out of gas and fall out of the sky.
Right.
That's what happens when you don't have any strategy behind what you're doing. And bad news, there's a lot of people that make a lot of money on the backs of people that are running as fast as their little scurrying feet can keep them moving on a hamster wheel that's called social media. Yeah. They don't know why they're doing it, but they just know that they're getting a lot of followers. They're getting a lot of subscribers. They're getting a lot of these things. But just like the plane falling out of the sky, they don't even know why they're doing it or where they're going, where they're supposed to touch down, when, in crypto Twitter, we'd say take profits. Like, when are you getting paid? How is this going to be sustainable? Because if you're not landing to refuel, to set your next destination point and like actually do this with some strategy, you're just gonna fall out of the sky and die. The little hamster is just gonna stop running.
Yep.
And then guess what? There's another hamster. There's millions of them to take your place on the wheel, and it's gonna keep rolling, and people are gonna keep making money on their backs.
Yep.
So I have a very, very specific viewpoint of content creation and the way that it's been perpetuated to just kind of suck you dry. It's a little bit of a Hollywood situation where it's like, we'll take in people from anywhere on the planet. We're going to get everything that we want out of you, and we might just spit you out as like an empty husk after we're done with you, and you're no longer beautiful and 20 years old. But that machine's going to keep going without you. And so I really think strategy matters a lot, just to make it more down to earth, is like, know what you're trying to achieve so that you can look back at it, and then you can iterate and make the next move, and then iterate and make the next move, and make little pivots as you go, as opposed to just throwing everything you can at the internet, because the internet's never going to tell you to slow down or to stop. It'll just keep taking until you're empty and you don't got anything left. And then you fall out of the sky.
Dude, I love it. Yeah. Isn't that yet again just another beautiful way of saying the same thing? I literally had this conversation today with Bubble. And we asked ourselves the question, are we iterating too much or too fast? And that's a real good question to ask yourself. And our answer was no, because we had the right landing pad and we had the right strategy, right? My strategy has been, and I stress this, and you're exactly aligned and you agree with me. I stress this whenever I talk to content creators. I think, yes, start creating content, see what resonates. But once you do find things that start resonating, you've been needing to spend an immense amount of time understanding your mission and your vision, right?
Yep.
Me and my co-founder on Midlife, we spent probably 3 or 4 months writing a multiple-page document and quelled it all the way down to bringing back the lost art of genuine human connection. We're firmly convinced as we get more connected, what we're doing now, deep, authentic conversations, they're going out the window. And it's very critically important to me to continue to have these, to show people, one, there's skill set involved in this, but two, it just needs to happen. And so that's my mission. And there's many ways to get there, and iterating through that. And especially in a pace like Web3, why I've never given up on Web3. And I've heard this 100% rate from founders that have been on the show. It needs it. But the question is, okay, how do you convince the Web3 people that they need to hear and resonate the same message? Because the audience is not my customer. That's a totally different thing. And my customer actually technically is not even Web3 founders sometimes, depending on the situation. So what you're saying is absolutely important. I think creatives need to understand this. And what we see is what, and I'd love to hear some examples for yourself, and we're really transitioning into this kind of business creative world, is the meta for a long time has been either Twitter Spaces or Twitter Threads. And you've got all these content creators that are like, oh, if I just out Twitter thread enough people, I'm going to be somebody. And it's like, these people are already well established, right? The whale whooshes of the world, right? That dude is going to get a high percentage of the business available when it comes to tweeting and writing about NFTs. You're going to be very hard pressed to just start pumping out threads to overtake somebody like that. What are your thoughts on mistakes made from creatives because they're seeing these metas or these things, and how they should do things differently?
Good question, dude. So I think this is so under talked about, and I'll start it off by saying this. If you ever hear somebody reference Mr. Beast doing something, they fundamentally don't understand what I'm about to say. They completely don't get it. It doesn't matter what Mr. Beast does, because you're not Mr. Beast.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what your already established creators are doing. You don't copy them thinking that you're going to get the same results, because you're comparing where you're at in your journey with something way down the line that somebody else is doing. If an F1 race car swaps the tire and then they get back on the race and they do all that stuff. It does not mean that you need to go spend, $4,000 on some special tire next time you're, swapping out stuff on your car. It has
Yep.
nothing to do with you. You're not a race car.
Yep.
Like your thing is not that. So look at where you're at in your journey and compare yourself to yourself. Because if you go take the steps that are working for established creators and you just emulate that to the T, you don't have any guaranteed results. And the truth is, it's way harder to get people to start caring about you when all you're doing is copying other people. So like that, it happens with metas. Now, I mean, there are some really good strategies out there that essentially say fake it till you make it, copy people, do all these things. I just don't know that that grows you. And I could be wrong. I'm wrong about lots of things in life, by the way. But I don't think that it grows you an authentic audience that cares a lot about what you're doing. If anything, it fools the people who don't matter. And the people who do matter they're not tricked by your just copying the copy pasta. You're just doing the same thing everyone else is doing. And so I very much feel like if you're starting on YouTube or whatever, don't go watch what people are doing right now as like the main thing. Don't go watch a Mr. Beast movie and say, I need to copy and do the things Mr. Beast is doing. That's not going to get you where you want to go. Where you do want to do is like pay attention to the things that are working, the things that people are, to the point about Web3, pay attention to the things that people here care about, because maybe they need something. They really need this idea or this framework or whatever it is. It would help the space. They need it. But if they don't want it and you're out there with no established presence and you're telling all these people that they need what you've got, but they don't want it, no one's going to listen.
Yeah, who gives
That's just the truth of it. You can lead a horse to water and all that stuff, but if they're not trying to have the thing that you're putting in front of them, then they're not going to pick up what you're putting down. So it is very difficult, and it's very imperative that people they carve out their thing and they work their way through their journey and they learn from their metrics and their results, and they make those little micro pivots and they get better and better with real metrics. Don't go buy followers. That just cheats you out of learning about yourself.
Yeah.
I think people just need to build on themselves and not just copy what everyone else is doing.
Another beautiful, beautiful insight. I feel like a monthly creator marketing deep insight Chris and Mikey podcast coming. I mean, this is beautiful, man. And I'll layer on to that. And I'll say this. I don't think you're saying, and I'm definitely not saying, there isn't a strategy that lives in that ecosystem where you can copy things and get clout and build an audience. You absolutely can. But I think one, it's way harder to do. And then two, it goes back to this tried and true principle that you hear all the time. You're not building any substance. So you're getting in the air, like you said, with the plane, but you have no landing space. And what I've had and seen time and time again is you might be able to make a bag very quickly, but that shit is not going to last long. And now you've put all of this work into something that's not sustainable because you never had a vision. You're never doing it yourself. And you never really had the introspective conversation of what do you want to do and what are you good at and how can you provide at the end of the day. And this is the question I ask everybody this after the podcast. And I try to ask it multiple times. What can I do for you? How can I provide value with my skill set? Like that, those are the types of questions you need to be answering, not how can I do what a very Mr. Beast popular thing is and just analyzing his YouTube thumbnails. Like that's what people will go tell you to do. Yes, some of that information is good when you're creating your thumbnails, but that is not going to make you successful. So I love the insight. I love the insight, man. Before we get, and what's cool is we're kind of mixing a little bit of like content creation, which would be more episode 3. Anything on episode 2 before we get into the Web3 and continue this content creation conversation, because I love it. You had an entrepreneurship journey there. Anything, and I think what I'm interested in building this brick and mortar business, converting it over to web and residual income, biggest wins and successes, maybe 2 each, like big wins you're proud of, failures that people could learn from.
Yeah. So the very interesting thing about kind of my middle story there, when I was like, teenager, I was 19. I was just getting into cars. I was at the point where I'd kind of transitioned from being super hardcore in the skateboard world to, now I'm driving, I'm 17 and finally got, the license, got the hand-me-down car. I start looking into it, and it's this little Hyundai. And back in the day, Hyundais were not cool. They didn't have turbos, they weren't rear wheel drive. You basically got made fun of if you thought your Hyundai was cool, right? I was the guy that thought his Hyundai was cool. I'm looking at body kits, looking up all these parts that I can add on there. And I learned very quick that there weren't a lot of parts available for my car. And the very interesting, like abridged version of all this is that the person that got me to go into business for myself, that gave me words of encouragement that changed my life, was not it wasn't dad said, "Hey, you should go into business for yourself." He'd been saying that my whole life.
Yeah.
And then also saying, "But work for me." Uh, um, but it was a dude who manufactured parts for cars. And he came in and he saw, I was asking him, about, hey, they did plastic injection molding for cold air intakes on a car. And I had just done this whole big thing. I changed my car from an automatic to a manual. I learned about all about like automotive forums that document how to do all this stuff. And people came out and donated their time, just helped this kid they didn't know on the internet from the message boards to like change everything, swap the motor and the transmission and the fuel lines and all this stuff. I stripped my car down to a bare frame, put it all back together with the help of one friend, and some people that donated some, expertise and, some like big brother tutelage kind of stuff.
Right.
And I learned all this stuff, and I was just like so passionate about cars at this point. I was like, I could do anything. I could whatever. Uh, I go visit this guy, and I'm like, you should make the cold air intakes for this car, and here's my story, and blah blah blah. And he listens, and he hears me out, and he's like, oh man, that's crazy. Your last name, the thing that he picks up on, your last name, it's the same as that company that makes those poker tables. I was like, yeah, that's us. That's the family company. That's what they do. He's like, no way, you're kidding. We get into it. He goes, I want a table, and I'm like, cool. Well, like, I just want you to make parts for my car. And I go back and forth with him on all this stuff. And he goes, you know what? You're good at this business stuff, sales and all this stuff. He's like, I think you should just become a distributor and just sell our products. He's like, the retailers, they make all the money. We're the manufacturer. It's hard. Like we hardly make anything. I think you'd be great at it. You should do this. I literally came home that day and I told my parents, I was like, I know what I'm going to do. I was 19. I know what I'm going to do for a living. This is it. I'm going to have this online store. We're going to sell all the parts. We're going to blah, blah, blah. And later, like a day or two after that, me and my wife are sitting in the car. My wife is my 19-year-old girlfriend at the time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, what should we name it and all this? And we workshopped a bunch of names. She comes up with the name Flyride, and I look it up and it's not available online. So I change the I in ride. I change it to a Y.
Yeah.
So it's FLYRYDE. And that's available. This is 2004. I buy the .com. I start the thing. Rest is history. Started the automotive brand. Everything went in that direction. And then I eventually pivoted the video stuff to be a big part of that company. And it all happened just because some dude that wasn't, I didn't know him from anybody. He didn't know me from anybody, but he just gave me these words of encouragement. I literally donated 20 years of my life to Flyride as a direct result of that guy just giving me that encouragement. And so that, on top of the fact that the only reason I was there was because people showed me how to do some stuff that I was in no position to pull off myself. They showed me some how-tos, and that became a huge core part of my mission, where it's like, show people how to do stuff. You might just change their life.
That's amazing, right? Man. That's so cool. And yet again, just a really cool way of getting there. I am interested now in the, oh man, son of a bitch, I did that wrong. Shoulda. And this is an example of you being able to share that information on, you might want to think about not doing this because this hurt me.
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of failure, to be honest. So like I would just say,
I think failure is absolutely necessary. Like, you're gonna be crazy if you think you go through something and grow as a human being, but do not fail. But
Yeah.
maybe not spend as much time failing on a certain thing, just like that kinda almost fatherly advice.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is like literally it's daily. I got a 16-year-old and a 7-year-old, so I'm always kind of walking them through all this stuff too. And I think just overall, it's thinking that you're beyond learning something from somebody else, or um, just kind of always being so cocky and arrogant that you're gonna go like put other people in harm's way. I think I'm not gonna get into it, but I did have some very bad episodes that had to do with that car and me just believing that this car that I was modifying was like it mattered so much.
Right.
And the truth was, it was kind of one of those things where I was like, it was a possession that I was putting so much time and energy into. Super glad I did it because of the end result and what came from me learning from it all. But I learned very quickly that all these material things, like at best, you think you have them, but they really have you. At worst, it costs you things that you could never get back because you just chase things down for too long. So I think I made the right decision, and I pivoted away from things that could have easily cost me like more than I could possibly like be okay with giving up for. Friends, relationships, money, like I get in trouble all the time, but same token, it's like everything I was into. Skateboarding, cops are always chasing us. We're always running. We're always breaking into schools and doing stuff we shouldn't have been. Like we were just little rebels. So with cars, it was very much the same thing. And like I think I just learned that material stuff is fleeting. So, you better learn some lessons. And I don't know. I just think that my story just happened to where it all worked out. So I think
Yeah.
a lot of other people, they just chase that thing into straight into poverty and they stay there forever. So
Yeah. And yeah, it's yeah, you definitely it's not good to have no money at all. We can confirmly say that it's not going to be an easy life, but at the same time, I think what you said is super powerful, and people need to understand that these learning lessons are critical, but at the same time, remind me what you just said, because you said something very interesting, and I'm
I mean,
blank.
basically said don't chase all the stuff and let it lead you into poverty. I think that the bigger lesson is kind of like it's not the stuff that matters that you're putting all your time and energy into. It's yourself. Like you got to
Okay,
come out of these things where it's like you still have you. I don't have that car anymore. I
right.
just have all the lessons that I retained from all that stuff, and then I used it to move forward.
Yes, and so what I wanted to layer onto this too is a way, and again, I really like tangible, like, insight and lessons to this. My version and interpretation of that was once I got really sick and you have a near-death experience, I think something that can help you out, because I totally agree with you, is when you have to make these decisions of like, okay, I'm gonna spend 10 more grand on making this car beautiful, or I could spend 10 grand on like bettering my family's life, right? And you're making these decisions. It's really hard a lot of times for people to say no because it's the thing you really want to do. My solution to that, and has been since all of this happened, and I've made some unpopular decisions, like selling my house and living with my in-laws now. I live in a generational home, right? Not many people would make that decision.
Right.
Best thing I've ever done, hands down.
Love it.
Amazing decision, because it gave me financial freedom, it gave me flexibility, and now I can really concentrate on the things that I want, right? And that is a no-brainer. But how did I get there? I created 3 pillars in my life around flexibility, financial freedom, and friends and family. And if my answer to the question does not involve at least one, most likely all 3, it's no. And it's just that simple. So what I'm getting at is creating parameters around these decisions, which a lot of people don't do. They just go with their gut instinct. I think it's really important. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think initial instincts a lot of times are the things that lead you to want to punch a guy because you don't like what he did. So your initial gut reaction is like, man, I'd love to hit that guy. That's probably going to have negative repercussions. The driving and people get all aggressive because they cut you off. And, oh, I'm going to just ram their car. Like, all of these gut reactions that people have, whatever comes natural and easy and like it's your first impulse, like I always want people to like question that is like the thing that's the absolute easiest choice to make. You really think that's the best choice you can make?
Right.
And all of this stuff comes into play with business, with all these other things. It's kind of like think deeper. What's the right thing? Like marriage is the hardest thing ever, and it's also the best thing ever in my life. I've been with my wife for 23 years on November 25th. Like that's crazy, and I'm 40. So like that doesn't just happen easy. That's a lot of decision making and like not just, oh, that girl's paying attention to me, I should probably go like talk to her. Like, I don't know, probably not, bro. Like, don't just do the gut reaction with everything. Have a plan that guides you so that you don't make dumbass decisions off the cuff.
Yep. Love it. And it's funny that you bring this up because another thing that I think it is important for that mantra, that mission that we said, bringing back the law started genuine human connection, we made pillars to again, how do we support this mission? And one of them is literally do the right thing, but the right thing is always the harder thing to do. Honesty beats happiness, hands down, because that happiness that you're chasing with dishonesty is temporary, right?
Yeah.
And so you're gonna go through some tough times, to be honest, and to do the right thing, and it's gonna be a little harder, but I promise you at the end of the day, that's the right decision. So that's another way for you to say that. I appreciate it, man.
I had a friend say something. I just want to throw this in real quick. Buddy of mine, his name's Benji Travis. He's a super dope dude in the YouTube world and all that. And we were having this discussion one time. We used to do all these clubhouse spaces together and all that.
Yeah.
And in one of the rooms, something came up and it was like, what do you really, really want? And my response was, I just want to be happy. Right. And he came back and he basically like on the side, like, in back channels or whatever, hits me up and he's just like, I want to ask you about something later. We had this little talk afterwards and he said, I want to push back on your kind of like thesis of like just pursuing happiness and being happy. And it was like, I think what you're saying is that you want peace. You just want to have peace in your life. He's like, happiness can be fleeting. Happiness can be your circumstances. And like, I'm all good. I'm making money. I'm this, I'm that. He's like, but what if your family, what somebody who's super close to you, something rough happens to them? How happy are you? You might be happy with your situation, but you don't have peace because now you've got this turmoil of all this other stuff going on. And so that I was like, damn, Benji, what a wise young man you are of his young 40 years. And it just kind of hit me, and it's always stuck with me since, is that like truly having peace, making the right choices, doing all of that stuff, it's so much better than just having this like temporary high and then just absolute fallout right on the other end of it. That peace is like, that's hard to attain for sure.
Yeah. And I love, yet again, another great way to reframe it. And then my layer on to that is like, listen, at the end of the day, when I go to rest forever, I don't want to be making decisions that I look back on that I insanely regret. Yes. Are you often going to make mistakes that might be topical? For sure. But there's things that everybody knows. If you make these decisions, this shit will haunt you and it will come back to bite you. And those are the things that I think about, right? And that's another way of saying, like I say, I want to lay down and be able to look back and say, I tried my best to do the right thing for the right reasons. That's all you can say. And that's another version or another way of saying peace, right?
100%, dude.
Because you're peaceful when you do go to sleep, right?
Yeah. That's right.
Dude, we're gonna have to have another episode talking about Web3 creative. Like, I think we could have a really robust conversation about another hour of just content creation in Web3. I got about like 13 minutes left. Not even 13 minutes. I got about like 10 minutes left. So within the 10 minutes, and I need a couple minutes to just kind of wind it down. Uh, let's talk for a little bit about um, your quick on your Web3 journey. What got you excited? What you're currently doing now, and what are you most excited about in the future? And I know that's a shit ton to do in
Nah,
like
I
less
got it.
than 10 minutes,
Yeah.
but I really don't want to miss this part.
Yeah. So I mean, this is all I talk about in the space for the most part. And I mean, the in a nutshell is when I learned about Web3 and I realized that I had pivoted from caring about skateboarding and videoing that. And then later on, I cared about automotive and I pivoted and I pointed the camera at that. And then I found Web3 and I came here and I was like, wow, these guys suck at content so bad. They're so terrible. And they don't even point cameras at things. They're just pictures of squirrels and chickens and turtles and shit. And it's weird here because no one's on video. And so I came in and I was a little bit ahead of this whole meta that, like, yeah, video is the greatest. And I was out there to the point of you could tell them what they need, but if they don't want it, it's hard to get traction with that stuff. I was
Right.
just a little bit ahead of talking about streaming and doing the things that I was doing with my automotive business and the, YouTube channel and all the stuff that I had accomplished there. And I had to really just like slow down, learn the vibes, learn from, what the system actually was running on. And a lot of it had to do with just current metas. And you're not coming in as some outsider and telling the space what they need. That doesn't work. There's things that they want, and you've got to kind of understand the system. What I
What
did learn
But
very
real
quickly.
quick
Go ahead.
to chime in, let's be honest, that's all these metas are all just driven by how can I make the most money?
Yeah, I mean, so there's that, but then there's such a deeper stuff to that too. IRL, when I came into it, wasn't possible because of COVID. So
Yeah.
like it didn't even matter what I wanted. I went to NFTLA in early 2022, and that was the first time any of these people had seen each other. So
Yes.
like there's a patience aspect to all of this as well, that like I might be idealistic and say what I want to exist. But at the same token, I have to realize there's a special recipe that came together that could never come together again the way that it did to create this ecosystem that existed when I came into it. What I will say is I looked around at the creators, and this is my current thesis as well, is that there are people here that are making really good money as content creators despite the fact that they're not good. And
Yes.
it's because they didn't have to be good.
Mhm.
Because there's just not that many people here that are doing things and they're winning. So if they're winning and if they're not good, what incentive do they have to be good? I don't think that it exists. It's
Yeah.
like telling a rich kid to get out there and just work really, really hard for little money and go, sacrifice his time and his energy and his care. Just go work really hard. It'll be worth it. Well, I don't know, because if he does nothing and he wins anyway, and how are you really going to get that guy to go do that?
Right.
That's my critique on the space right now is they don't have to be good and therefore they're not good. I know that at some point that's that's going to shift into the rest of the world where it's incredibly saturated and it's hard to stand out because there's so many amazing standout talents out there.
Yep.
And when that hits this space, a lot of these people aren't going to be ready. And I take it personally as like a great mission to help get them ready. You
Yep.
know,
I
so
I
I teach people about content.
I love that, man, and I also think the way to get around it, and it should be the thing that happens is, it's funny. I have people like Tyler from DSK Dow, amazing dude, right? And this is the kind of the same concept, but in a different way. We coined the phrase because unfortunately, how life works is the nice guy finishes last majority of the time. But if we get enough nice guys together and girls together, we can finish first. And it's the
Right.
same concept with creators, right? If we can get enough good, high quality people together doing it the right way for the right reasons, we can. And that is the goal. And that is our opportunity that I try to stress with everybody too. We're totally aligned on this is it's so small still as an ecosystem. If we can get together as the creators that are, have tried and true brands like ourselves, have a mission, and find that cohort of people to then overtake the meta content that's constantly, listen, the meta content will stay there, but the core group of these creators that are trying to do it the right way with a mission, we can finish first as well. So I'm
Yeah.
firmly convinced of that.
Yeah. I also think that there's a big learning curve for a lot of creators in this space, that unlike most other spaces, they actually stand to gain a whole lot to learn about business and learn about sales,
Yes.
and understand that, like, those are two different languages, your content creator language and then your business development language. Like, they're two different things, and very few people speak both languages. I happen to be very bilingual in this situation, and I usually have to talk to one camp and then bridge over what they want and what they need to the other camp, and back and forth on that. And so I do think it is a way bigger discussion. It's a whole podcast in itself.
I
But
can't
I
wait.
do think everybody owes themselves at least enough to say, if you've learned about making content, you should learn about business development and sales as well, because those two things are very much attached to each other, whether you want it to be or not. Someone
Yeah.
has to do the BD. It's probably good that you understand the language that they're speaking when they're telling you that they need some creative to help them accomplish what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to give you a minute or two, wind down. And then I got one last question I always ask at the end, and then we can wrap it up. And I feel like we need to figure out how to plan multiple more of these because this is beautiful. The energy is palpable. So the last question is the future. What does the future look like? Like, what are you excited about? What are you concentrating on? What are you doubling down on as a creator?
I think I'm mainly looking at the opportunities that exist out there for creators, and I'm kind of helping shape something that I wish it existed for me. And so, oddly enough, 3 years into the space, I'm finally at a point now where I'm building something using blockchain tech specifically to have a lot of the problems that I've faced as a content creator in the space full time. This is all I do. I've just learned a lot about the pitfalls and that stuff, and using the tech and the actual. I mean, how meta is that? It's using blockchain to solve this.
Yeah.
It's cool. So I'm very excited about building. I'm excited about L1s reaching out and wanting to work with creators and all the opportunities that we have as creators, and the incentive to be good. I
Yeah.
think that's a big one that I'm really excited about.
Dude, fantastic. Such a great conversation. We're gonna have to give me a minute or two after we wind it down. We'll have a quick chat and then we'll go so we can talk about future collaboration. But this is how I end every, knowing that we had condensed time. Still want your genuine feedback on how you think Mike G Midlife Crisis podcast goes compared to, dude, you've run Twitter Spaces yourself. You've been in a bajillion Twitter Spaces. You've been on a lot of podcasts. How was your time today, man?
It was great, dude. I love that I got to talk a lot about the pregame, and what led to all the other stuff. Because a lot of people just want to dive right into the essentially like the Mr. Beast video. And I'm
Yeah.
like, nah, man, you got to understand the stuff that led to that. So
Yeah.
it was good.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that feedback. That's exactly what I'm going for, and it means a lot. My closing comments to you, man. I did good energy going on here. I think we have a lot to share knowledge wise, but also help out. I can totally. I'm in North San Diego, so I want to meet you in real life. I think we have opportunities. Are you still doing the weekly meetup? Is that still happening?
LA's in chaos, but I do think I'm shooting an event in San Diego on Thursday night. I
We
think.
I might. Yeah, no, I'm gonna be gone this week. No, but I'm talking. I thought there was a weekly
Yeah.
LA meetup.
Yeah. So IRL Alpha has been something I've spent the last year
Uh-huh.
driving 100 miles each direction to get to,
Oh,
and setting any of my client shoots, all that stuff to always happen on Thursdays.
right.
And right now that's just in flux and it's pivoting, and there's different people doing different direction stuff, and
Gotcha.
that's how it goes.
All right. Well, that sounds like it might open an opportunity for us to do some stuff too. I mean, who knows? But yeah, man, I genuinely look at this at the beginning of a friendship. I think I've always loved your content. I've always loved your energy. I cannot wait to continue to just have some conversations, figure out how we can grow, learn, and kick ass together. Right? The space needs more of this, and I'm really excited to bring it to them. So thank you so much for your time. I know you're incredibly busy. Time's the number one thing both of us have in our life. I actually need to leave to go get my teeth cleaned. So that's where I'm going next. But so much, so much, so much, so much love. And that's it. Midlife crisis is over for the day. We had a quick one, but an amazing one at that. Mikey G, Chris D, we love you all. Midlife crisis is out.